Good morning, everyone. I hope all is well, and I want to thank you for joining me at this special presentation for Seed 5. Before we jump in, I want to thank Brandon Martin. I want to thank all the individuals who have helped behind the scenes. I want to thank anyone who has helped, spread some health awareness and, just spread this information on Seed 5. And I want to thank all of the guests, all of the presenters. I love all of y'all's content, and it is a great honor, and it's a special thing for me just to be able to present for Seeds 5. So I want to thank everyone, and I hope to inspire anyone listening, and just it's all about spreading this information and trying to plant these seeds, because if we don't do that, then don't expect too much to change. So again, thank you, and I hope that everyone enjoys my presentation. The everlasting lamp. So again, like with a lot of my presentations, you will not be hearing anything new as far as this presentation right here. There is not enough time for me to go into everything in detail and to break things down within the small amount of time that is you know allowed for me to do. So I just want to always put this out there that there just is not enough time for me to go into all the details of everything that I would like to in this presentation. A lot of things have to get cut and left out, but unfortunately, that's just that's the situation given. There are links posted within the presentation by way of QR code. So if anyone wants to, dive deeper um, when watching this on replay, you can always scan the QR code and, dive into greater detail. There's plenty of videos and books, um, and the QR codes can be scanned. And also, too, I will use the words fire and light interchangeably a lot in this presentation. So just something that, I want you to be aware of. So my presentation is talking about symbolism. So let's get a good baseline on what I'm describing when I'm talking about the word symbolism. So, what is a symbol, or what is symbolism? That's what I'm going to be discussing. And of course, fire symbolism. And mainly because this main element has always been something that has resonated within me. That internal fire, it was something that was sparked inside of me. It was like a hunger, a thirst. It was a thirst that I just couldn't get rid of. And this is what led me onto my journey. When that fire started to burn within me, and it started me down my journey. I had a thirst for knowledge, and a couple of years later, here I am trying to explain to people and trying to educate people on the importance of this fire symbolism. And of course, there are other elements out there. Just the fire symbolism is the one that I'm choosing to talk about. So I'm going to be describing fire symbolism within the mind, fire symbolism within the heart, fire symbolism within the realm of action, and of course, this would be in the manifestation of the hands, something that I've talked about many times before. And then the importance of protecting the flame, and the importance of passing on this lantern, because that is a requirement also. Is we have to make sure that we continue to pass on this knowledge. We have to continue to pass on these great gems of wisdom, this information, this truth, so that others can see, so that others can have that same clarity that we was given. We can't just think that, oh, just because we know, it's all good. No, we have to be willing to put that information back out there for other generations and for other people. So let's start off with a quote from the great Manly P. Hall. This ring of invisible flame is the eternal fire, the spark from the infinite will of birthless, deathless, and eternal center. that includes within itself all that it has ever been, all that it is, and all that it ever shall be. This germ dwells in the state of eternity. For to this immortal spark, time is illusionary, and distance is non existence. Joy and sorrow are unknown, for concerning its function and consciousness, all that can be said, it is, while other things come and go, it is. Another great quote. According to Gnostic teaching, the world is a mixture of the seeds of light and of darkness, though it is impossible to distinguish between them now. In all fullness of time, they will separate naturally as ordained. The great Gnostic teacher, Stephen A. Heller. So, what is a symbol? What is a symbol? We hear this term a lot. So, the etymology of the word symbol from Greek origin, sin or sun, together, um, or like, with. Then you have bowl, bowl. So you have sun and bowl, or sin and bowl. Bowl was meaning to cast, to throw, to put, or put in place. So you just combine those two words. So a clear meaning would be a symbol is two things placed together to develop better clarity, meaning, or understanding by way of comparison. Because that's what you are doing, is you are comparing two things, and you're using a symbol as a representation of something else. Just like you can see in this depiction, the first vegetable, the carrot, it is a symbol that represents a number. So given the capacities of our thinking, we can compare and figure out what the number is by way of understanding what the symbol is and just using some logic. And symbols are not good. They are not evil. They're just simply a tool for one to understand a deeper meaning, a tool for us to understand ourselves, a tool for us to understand some deeper aspects of ourselves, to get back in touch with ourselves, get back in touch with things that may have been lost, things that may have become unknown or that we are ignorant to. Symbolism is a huge part of the conscious being's life. And as many great teachers said, man must live a symbolic life. Man must live a symbolic life. And if anyone has not checked out Nate Cap's Oculus presentation from Funnel 3, great presentation. He breaks down symbolism very well, that most people should be able to understand it. And I highly encourage anyone to go out and check out that presentation. I watched it many, many times. So let's look at fire symbolism within the mind, because one of the things that fire was always symbolic of was truth, light, knowledge, information. And what good would humans be if we didn't have knowledge, if we didn't have that truth, if we didn't have that light, if we didn't have that vision, if we didn't have that clarity, if we didn't have that guidance? So the fire was always symbolic of that. Whenever you had an idea, you would have like a bowl illuminate within the mind. It represented the intellect, all of the thoughts, all of the intellectual programming, ideas that come, all of their mind chatter. Then you have the power and the energy, because ideas and thoughts create emotions that will eventually lead to action. So this is what gets the cogs, flowing. It's their energy. And then you also had the free will, being able to think, being able to use judgment, being able to use discernment. And then, of course, you have the fire symbolic as the savior, the protection, because to ancient man, fire was that protection. It was that savior figure. There's a reason why many traditions will go out and watch the birth of the sun, the rising of the sun. And then you also had it symbolic of the passing of traditions, especially the occult traditions, the traditions, the mystery traditions, the whole passing of the teachings. Either it may have been, the word of mouth, the passing of important knowledge, the passing of the lamp. And then, of course, you had it being a representative of man's inner illumination, because that's what man is here to do, illuminate. So let's look at the aspect or the symbolic aspect of truth, light, and knowledge, because uh, not many people really take this as being important, because man is here to navigate. That's the reason why we have our neocortex. There's the reason why our minds, our brains, our physiological makeup is structured the way that it's structured. So we have this thing called the mind. It could be like a GPS system. We can use it to map out the objective world, to navigate, being able to remember, being able to recognize things, being able to recognize patterns, mapping out our environment. So we are here to navigate. Man is here to understand. That's a form of growth, knowing, knowledge, growing, being able to interpret that information through our senses, being able to, to actually filter that information. That's what it means to navigate. And we are here to harmonize with that which is the objective world, with truth. That's the whole importance of light. Without light, you would be running or bumping into things. If you ever try to navigate in a dark room, it is extremely hard. You're going to be falling over stuff, running into things. You can't see in darkness. It is extremely hard to navigate in darkness. We don't do well in darkness because you can't take in that external stimuli of information. Your sight can't take in the information. The only thing you can do is put your hands out. You can try to listen through external stimuli, but you can't take in that sensory, that vision, that light. So it can be processed in the back regions of the neocortex. Because that darkness is ignorance and fear. Because that darkness is always there. It's just you can't take it in because you don't visibly have the light. You don't visibly have the knowledge. And the darkness is what we don't know or what we refuse to know, because it does come down to choice. So then we have use and abuse. You got the intellect, power, free will. You have the illuminating within, the choosing to use this knowledge, use this power for free will consent. You're not violating someone else's, free will choice. You're not violating someone else's rights. You're not stopping their progress, their conscious progress. You are helping others to see through these falsities. You are upholding the natural law. You are choosing right action over wrong. That's what grants the real power, not the illusionary power of hoarding the light, hoarding the knowledge, extinguishing the flame with ignorance, because sadly, ignorance and fear is what extinguishes that flame, is what extinguishes that inner light. Using light to create darkness, using obfuscation to create shadows, to create ignorance, resisting the laws of nature, thinking that you can become the arbiter of law, thinking that you can create law. You know, this is a disease intellect, one who's taken that power and associated with their ego, and now they're violating other people's free will. And then you have one of the oldest forms, the savior, you know, the protection right here. Because the sun was one, the sun, the sun was one of man's first savior symbols, you know. Um, way back then, when you just had light and darkness. Darkness was always associated with the predators, with evil. You know, all of the animals who can see at night will come out to hunt. And man didn't have those skills. So man would always look toward the sun, the rising sun, as a symbol. We take so much of this for granted nowadays, but it's still ingrained in our psyche. Because people in today's day and age still take the sun as a savior symbol. We all do, because we need it to, you know, to pretty much live, to stay warm. You know, when the sun's out, usually we have, uh, you know, more happier, vibrant energy compared to when it's cold. And then we have the keeping and passing down of tradition. And I saw this symbolically represented in the legend of Prometheus, which I know a lot of people think that Prometheus is like a bad allegory, but I think it's more of a positive allegory. The importance of knowledge, the importance of passing of certain traditions. You know, making sure that the knowledge stays alive, making sure that others can educate themselves. I think that's one of the best things that was taken out of the Prometheus story, because he was willing to steal fire from the gods. He was willing to give up his own personal sacrifices because he understood the importance of the knowledge, of passing this stuff down to others, even at the cost of death and the depths that the initiate would endure trying to attain this knowledge. That's something that we also take for granted, you know. In today's day, you know, we have the technology, but ancient man didn't have these luxuries. Ancient man would actually have to travel across deserts, hundreds, thousands of miles to get this knowledge. They would literally have to face death and all of the conditions, you know, all of the external environmental conditions that they would have to go through just to get this knowledge, just to get initiated, or just to get this manuscript. Ancient man understood the importance of knowledge and the impact it had on consciousness. Sadly, we ignore it. And that's why our inner illumination is not there. We are not as vibrant as we should be. We're not radiating as we should be. Carl Jung, the symbol for self is an idea of a totality that is not identical with ego. It is consciousness, which is not our consciousness, a light which is not our light. Sigmund Freud. After all, we did not invent symbolism. It is a universal, age-old activity of the human imagination. I'm going to read that one again. Sigmund Freud. After all, we did not invent symbolism. It is a universal, age-old activity of the human imagination. Manly P. Hall. Symbolism is the language of the mysteries. By symbols, men have ever sought to communicate to each other those thoughts which transcend limitations of language. Which transcend limitations of language. All right. And as we look at the second part of the symbolic, you know, because symbolism we're going to be talking about within the heart. So, what were some of the symbolic aspects of fire within the heart? Of course, you had it representing true care, comfort, warmth, security, love. It was the initiation force or initiating. You also had a representing of sacrifice, and then also growth. So these are the symbolic representations within the heart. True care and initiation. I know care is one of the, it's one of the words that gets thrown around a lot, but when we're talking about true care, we are literally talking about the force that initiates. And true care is that initial spark that ignites that inner flame. It is that beginning. It's what creates, because true care is the driving force for conscious creation. Hell, again, conscious creation. True care can only create right moral action. So if you have that true care, then you'll be willing to sacrifice. You'll be willing to, lose some things, to give up for something that you truly do, care about. And think about it. Pretty much everything that we've ever wanted has involved some form of care. But true care is when you are willing to literally sacrifice and give up for something that is right, something that is good. Integrity is telling myself the truth, and honesty is telling the truth to others. Spencer Johnson. And sadly, in today's day and age, people have apathy for the truth. They'll say that they care for the truth. They'll say that they'll care for, what's really morally right. They'll say it with just words, but it's not backed up with true right action. So we have comfort, warmth, and security. This inner flame was a beacon guiding the soul on its journey. We always enjoy that time by the fire. And it's just like if you've ever gone to any campfire, just being around the fire, being by that fire, all of the warmth and comfort, it was a very kind of like loving feeling, a very caring feeling. You felt secure, you felt as though you were not in danger. Fire or that light is what brings illumination, clarity, vision, true illumination. Heat is another concept that we have the capacity to understand, and how certain heat or certain variable temperatures are going to have certain consequence depending on the health environment. And there are certain emotional pleasures that can come with that. And then you have protection. These are some of the internal emotional symbolic resonances that were always associated with the fire or the flame or the torch. Because we all really seek that internal fulfillment. You can say it's coming from our lesser, like animalistic, desires. That's fine, because desire was also one of the things that was associated with the fire symbol. Love and growth. We need to feed that inner flame and nourish it. That this inner light has no boundaries. There's nowhere it can't shine, no shadow it can't unveil, and no depth within our psyche it can't reach. This is the power of light, and the reason why this fire should burn bright within each of us. But you see, this love and growth has to come from something. It has to come from that aspect of true care. It has to come from that aspect of true care. Because we've seen how, certain groups or certain individuals can do some very immoral things based off of just eros. So you can't just have the eros form of love. You have to have the agape form of love, because that's what we are talking about. True care is agape, is true love. That's what leads you, that's what opens you up to growth. That's what opens you up to more abundance in information, in knowledge, in truth, in light. That's what feeds the flame. And this was always, symbolically represented by a lot of, her goddesses. You have Hathor, you have Freya, you have Demeter. Then you have like the archetype of the feminine goddess in the middle, Tyort. And then you just have the, like the embodiment of the feminine spirit, the feminine energy in the bottom right. Have the picture, have representing nature, because nature is always growing, is always giving its love, is always giving its abundance. It gets it from the sun. So again, you're still talking about energy, but we're talking about agape, growth, opening yourself up to take in, opening yourself up for that possibility to manifest and not cutting it off. And of course, sacrifice. Sacrifice. You can't have fire without sacrificing something. You can't manifest fire without sacrificing something. So when starting and maintaining any fire, you will always need components. You need oxygen, heat, fuel. These are requirements. So to fuel the flames and to keep them alive, there are requirements. If these requirements go unmet, then don't expect that which would never manifest by law. So what is humanity sacrificing? Hell, again, are we bringing the right sacrifices to the altar? Talking symbolically, are we still, sacrificing our fellow brothers and sisters to whatever, wartime gods? You have the Aztec sacrifice god, which Tlachtoltec in the depiction. Are we still doing those war sacrifices? Or are we actually sacrificing the correct form of time and energy, her dedication to try to educate ourselves, to try to educate those around us, to try to educate the next generation, conscious parenting? Are we sacrificing our time here, just worrying about sports and pleasure and materialistic things? Or are we listening to those who made that great sacrifice, like the ones we see in the depiction, and there's so many other great teachers that have literally, made that dedication so that I'm able to take in new information and to learn, and so that anyone who's listening to this, can learn. Because I tell you this, if a lot of these people didn't make that great, sacrifice, I wouldn't be here. You may not would even be here. I could still be asleep, still doing whatever stuff that is considered trendy. So I'm thankful that these individuals have made this sacrifice. So thankful that they made the sacrifice. And I would make that same sacrifice too. This is truth. When you sacrifice your life, you must make fullest use of your weaponry. It is false not to do so and to die with a weapon as yet undrawn. This is truth. When you sacrifice your life, you must make the fullest use of your weaponry. It is false not to do so and to die with a weaponry as yet undrawn. Miyamoto Musashi. All right, as we move on to the last aspect of it, fire symbolism of the hands. And this is one that I really want to focus on, and one that I really want to hammer on. Because I think this is something that a lot of people can see in today's day and age, with all the tyranny going on, with all the her loss of rights, with all the loss of freedom, and just all of the immoral things that we see being done by the state worshipers, how these big time corporations, and just the straight ignorance and like immorality of things. So I would think that most people by now would at least be somewhat able to see the physical signs. So I really want to hammer upon the fire symbolism of the hands. So one of the symbolic representations that fire was associated with was consequence. Fire was always associated with consequence, just like I was talking about earlier in the mythos of Prometheus. What was the consequences for what he did? Well, of course, he was imprisoned by Zeus, and he had a bird come out and I want to say eat out his liver. Um, it wasn't liver; it was one of the organs. But explaining, how the consequences that come, with no matter whatever we do, consequences can be good, consequences can be bad. They don't always have to be associated with something that's negative. There is a such good, thing as a positive, consequences, and hopefully some positive consequences can come from the C5, conference. Just seeing these presentations. So another thing that the fire was symbolically associated with was law. Um, and yes, we're talking about natural law, and sadly, it was associated with man's law. It was also represented by chaos. Fire is that one thing that's always changing, can never really be controlled. And then, of course, you also have change. That one thing that people seem to fear, true change. Then we have the self-defense, the warrior style energy. This is something that seemed to be dead in a lot of people. People don't want to fight back. People don't want to say no. People don't want to use their voice. People don't want to use their fire, that raging fire, for positive right action, to stand up and say no, to say I have had enough, in that self-defense masculine type form of energy. And then of course you have behavior. We have seen this being constructed and molded for generations now. Molding people's behavior like putty. And of course, the human will and the human potential. So when we look at how consequence, law, chaos, just as the many great myths and legends and stories and fables try to teach man, there is a cause and effect force in creation. There is a cause and effect force in creation. There is, not I believe, there is a cause and effect like force in creation that is ingrained within the fabric of the threads of society. This is clear, like this is evident. Even mainstream mind control science even talks about this. But no matter what we do, we can never escape it. Can never escape it. There will always be consequences. We will always be governed by law. Everything in the physical world will always be governed by law. Law is what governs the physical manifestation. Law is what governs the spiritual manifestation. Law is what governs and controls everything. We will never be able to escape this. Even by trying to think you can escape this is what starts to cause chaos. That's what starts to cause internal contradiction, because deep down subconsciously, all of us know that we can never ever escape a law. Ayn Rand, you can avoid reality, but you can't avoid the consequences of avoiding reality. You can avoid reality, but you can't avoid the consequences of avoiding reality. And sadly, that's what we see too many people trying to do, trying to avoid the consequences of not only what they've done, but of this objective reality. And again, that's what the fire symbolically, represents. Because if you constantly or if you touch a fire, what's going to be the consequences of that? Hopefully, you know, your neocortex is going to alert you that, hey, that scathed you. That was hot. That was extremely hot. High temperatures. Don't do that. Hell again. Something should pop off in your brain. Don't do that. Hell again. A learning, a learning mechanism can be used for growth. So, hell again, this works the same way. Consequences, law, chaos. You touch a fire, you will be burned. You continue to fuck with natural law, unfortunately, the natural law express will come in and unfortunately run you over. That's just the way things operate within this manifestation. And this depiction right here is sadly the future of humanity right here. This beautiful image of Themis is sadly what the future of mankind is choosing. This important picture right here. So dwell on it, even though it may look like a terrible situation. Sadly, it's just the way of things. You shouldn't get mad. You shouldn't be happy of it. This is just the choosing or the outcome that humanity is choosing right here. But it's going to happen, unfortunately, by law if we continue to make this choice. Themis is eventually going to pay us a visit. And I'm talking in a symbolic, allegorical representation. I'm not talking as a physical deity, symbolically. This is going to happen in some way or form. It may not happen overnight, but in some way, some form, this image, this depiction is going to come true. Unfortunately, because that's the consequences that we are choosing, unfortunately. And of course, we have change, change. How the phoenix was always symbolically represented with change, because fire is that one thing that constantly and always changes. If you ever view or, if you ever sat down and watched a fire, it never has it like it's pretty much like same shape. It's always dancing. It always has that fluidity. It can create just as it can destroy. And unfortunately, the mind and change like doesn't really operate, as well. So whenever like we are faced with change, it always creates this uneasiness, this level of uncomfort, but that's us trying to help adapt to our environment, help adapt to something new and take that in, so we can add it to our mapping, we can add it to our worldview, we can add it to our way of life. But this change was always symbolically represented by the unknown or unconscious, that which we don't know, but that which we need to dive into and that which we need to explore. And it was by exploring the unknown, by jumping into that information about our own psyche, about our own self that we may not know, that we may feel uncomfortable with, then that's how we start to learn more and light that fire and make it conscious. And that's how we really start to create ourselves by changing ourselves because we become or we've come to know, more about the self. So change should not be feared if it's right change, if it's correct change. But you see, they gotten us to kind of focus on change in the monetary system. Got any spare change? And then you also have the other linguistic form of when you say the word change, it still sounds symbolically like or linguistically like the word change, chains, you know, chains is in slave chains, shackle and feet chains, metal chains around your ankles, now idiots are wearing chains around their necks, so it's going from a form of physical slavery to a form of mental, spiritual, psychological slavery. But we need to get back to that real alchemical change, that phoenix. That's where the change I'm really associating it with. True change, you know, change that creates that force that makes you want to get up and do something. And then, of course, you have the self defense, a warrior, masculine like energy, something that a lot of people still don't want to associate with freedom. People still don't want to associate it with consciousness. People still don't want to associate its energy with growth. Without this warrior masculine like energy, you would never ever stand up for yourself. You would not say no. Self defense is a form of self care. Self defense is a form of self love. Self defense is a form of self respect. And just like fire was one of the tools of ancient man for self defense, now we have firearms. And firearms are some of the best tools for self defense. Of course, you should be using your voice. You should be using your words. You should be using non-verbal, body language to try to destabilize certain situations. But if that option fails, if the other option fails, and someone is aggressing on your body, on your rights and freedoms, then you have the right to exercise that natural law right. And a lot of people still don't want to accept this. Not accepting this means you're not operating holistically, not incorporating this masculine like energy, this self-defense energy, this warrior energy. It doesn't mean that you are overly aggressive. No, it's a defensive type energy. You know when to use it. You know when to say no. You know when to let it loose. You know when to open up the cage and deal with a certain situation, then you put it right back inside the cage. A lot of people fear this energy because they think that they are just going to let loose and they can't control it. Well, hell again, accountability, being a fucking adult. A warrior knows how to use their tools. They know how to maintain their tools. Any idiot can own a firearm, but do you know how to maintain it? Are you responsible with it? Do you actually go out and practice with it? So how many people would be willing to make that ultimate sacrifice for freedom? What has happened to this warrior, rebellious energy? It has been squashed. It has literally been squashed within people. It has been squashed in a lot of men. Too many men. And we've seen this. Because it's past that time, way past that time, man. It's been past that fucking time. Long gone past that time. Our behaviors are a reflection of our internal growth. If that internal flame has been suppressed or is running wild, expect to witness the manifestations outwardly. And this is the principle of correspondence. If our behaviors are still childlike, like underdeveloped, no sense of right and wrong, then we are going to manifest that outwardly. The principle of correspondence. Garbage in, garbage out. That's the trivium, And our behaviors can scar, they can consume, and they sure hell can suffocate. just as any fire can. So this is the dangers of our ignorance. This is the dangers of us creating unconsciously, because that's when we do start to scar. We do start to consume and suffocate others, just like any blazing fire would if it's not controlled or if it's overstimulated. So we're talking about the human will and the human potential, because we're not at the finish line yet, but man, it showed us feel like we are close there, with everything that's, taking place. And I always ask myself, like, man, like, is this is this the is this the end game goal for man? Man has this capacity to create. It has so much potential, infinite amount of potential, an infinite amount of human will. So I always say, like, is this it? Because, to start any fire or create anything requires willpower. And the human will once great and uplifting man to his highest of heights. Now we have fallen to the lowest of the low. And we see this in society, man. Like, it's so evident. It's like such potential has been squashed, but not yet fully quashed. So what will you do? What will humanity do? What will you do? What will you do to act? Will you act? Will you take action? The more individuals who sit back and do nothing, the more rights will be axed. The more rights will be axed. The more individuals sit back and do nothing, the more rights will be axed. So, hell, again, the human will and the human potential, you know, are we just going to sit, continue to do nothing, sit back and get screwed over? So, the sacred lantern, you know, the sacred lantern. I'm talking about symbolism. So why was the symbol of the lamp and the lantern so important? The flame has to be protected. The flame has to be protected. As we've seen throughout history, there are a lot of individuals who want to control knowledge, who want to hoard knowledge, and want to use knowledge for their own egoic purposes. So, a moral, responsible, integrated, like individual who takes this task on should be willing to protect the flame. Making sure that the knowledge doesn't fall into her wrong hands. And then two, like just like with any fire, um, the other elements can come and squash the fire, can extinguish the fire. So just look at like the elements of air, symbolically represented, by the mind chatter, the intellect, all of these isms, all of these forms of thoughts that are, injected into our consciousness, all of these ideas, all of these negative thought forms that are literally projected and interjected into our consciousness, into our way of thinking, with all the ads, all of the going by quickly, technology. This is the winds of the intellect. This is symbolically represented with air, and with just one strong gust of wind can blow out any flame. We see the elements of earth, and all of this pleasure and all of this, like material, just focus on how materialism, focus on whatever goods, focus on whatever role, hell, your job, hell, whatever egoic programming that you have attached with the car, the label, or the house, the sports team. We see people just stuck in that. And just like with the earth element, you can suffocate that fire. And then lastly, we have the symbolic representation of the waters, the emotional planes, which we see a lot of people just stuck in their hell emotions. They're not able to even take in hell, like any information. They're stuck in fear. They are stuck in those emotional waters, and it's putting out their fire. So we can see these other elements, can easily put out any flame symbolically and literally, so we have to be willing to protect this flame. We have to be willing to clean off that lantern. We have to be willing to, dust off, because just like with any other light, it can become obscure. Dirt and debris and all other forms of, filth can get onto the lantern and block, degrade its vision, degrade its light, and obscure what can be seen and what is possible. So it makes it easier to pass that lamp on to the next capable individual. How honoring our ancestors and being grateful and thankful, because it will always remain a beacon for those with eyes to see. Because you can never, ever put out this lamp. You can never, ever put out this lantern, no matter how hard you try to, no matter how hard they try to. You can never really fully put out this sacred lantern, because it is that lantern of truth. It is that lantern of light. So in closing, I'll leave it to the great Manly P. Hall. To repress rebellion is to maintain the status quo, a condition which binds the mortal creature to a state of intellectual or physical slavery. But it is impossible to chain man merely by slaving his body. The mind also must be held. And to accomplish this, fear is the accepted weapon. The common man must fear life, fear death, fear God, fear the devil, and fear most the overlords, the keepers of his destiny. Manly P. Hall. I want to thank everyone for sitting down and being present for this presentation. And again, I want to thank all of the wonderful individuals who have helped to put this magnificent event together. And I want to thank you as the viewer for sitting down and watching this presentation. I hope that there is just some food for thought to kind of spark some curiosity to try to get more people, um, you know, um, looking into, what symbolism is, and the importance of, have symbolism in our consciousness and in our, health development. And I hope that the individuals who are able to, our future individuals, can help watch this and pause it and check out some of the QR codes, because there are a lot of other great minds who have talked about symbolism. And, we really do need to get back to a symbolic life. So I thank you and enjoy the rest of this online conference and enjoy the rest of your day. Peace out.